Hello everyone and welcome to another exciting episode of Building Subtxt. Today I want to go over how you can go from a story idea to a complete treatment in about 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes. And this is not a thing where you just enter, please give me a story, and then it writes everything for you. And then you put it up on Amazon and you think you're going to make $1 million, whatever. No, subtext is just about the meaning of the story. You still actually have to write it. So if you're not interested in writing, like actually sitting down and doing the scenes and doing all that stuff, subtext is probably not for you. It's specifically about getting you to a place where you can write a better story, not necessarily your talent or your ability to write, but that the story itself actually means something. Like there's something more to it than just a bunch of stuff that happens. So that's what I'm going to show, how you can go from just a one-sentence story idea to something that is meaningful, yet you still need to do the work of actually writing it. All right. So we're going to use the narrative agents here. And you can see down here at the bottom, the progress bar, it's completely empty because you got to start working on stuff. So I'm just going to throw in a group of 1920s Chicago gangsters discover an old house full of strange sights and sounds. Whatever, just an idea. So I'm going to go ahead and reach out to Subtext's narrative agents to actually turn this into what is known as a complete story, something that shows all 4 through lines. So I'm just going to click this right here, find the 4 through lines, and it's going to warm up the servers, turn on the render farm for Subtext, and then go in and build out all the necessary thematic points so that we can have a meaningful story just based on that one idea. So as we go through this video, I'm going to cut and jump to the remaining spots. Jump to the end of it because it can take a little while as it goes through everything. It's going through and trying to pick out things that are very meaningful and related to one another. So you can see it's already extracted the 4 through lines, and now it's going to go through and do the main plot. And then the other 3 through lines will be the personal baggage of the main character, like their personal issues. And then there'll be an obstacle character who is there to challenge the main character and have them grow through their justifications and get to a place where they can see the world in a different light. And then the heart of the story is defaulted towards the relationship between those two people, which is something different than their own personal issues. And then at the end, it's going to blend them all together. So I'm going to zip forward because it's about halfway through here with the 4 through lines, and then we'll jump in and see what we have. Okay, everything's finished. Let's jump in and see what we have. And it should take us right to the 4 through lines. Turn that on till it lets you know that you've finished step 1. And here is the entire thing. So let's see what we have down here. Echoes of the unseen gangsters and the haunted house mystery. In the roaring 1920s, a group of Chicago gangsters led by the notorious Mr. Quince stumble upon an old, seemingly abandoned house. Their discovery leads them to a world of strange sights and sounds, challenging their understanding of reality. It almost sounds like a Scooby-Doo mystery. Mr. Quince, a hardened gangster known for his ruthlessness and strategic mind, finds himself out of his element in the mysterious house. That's cool. Haunted by a past that saw him rise from poverty to power, through violence and cunning, Quince is forced to confront his own vulnerabilities. That's actually pretty cool. Granny, I'm not super thrilled with. Who is Granny? An enigmatic old woman who appears to be the caretaker of the house becomes the unexpected obstacle to Mr. Quince and his gang. With her cryptic warnings and intimate knowledge of the house's secret, Granny challenges Quince's perceptions and decisions at every turn. Her presence forces Quince to confront the supernatural elements of the house head on. Actually, that's not too bad. Adversaries and allies. The relationship between the two evolves from one of suspicion. Okay, that's okay for right now. I'm not a huge fan of Granny. It seems ridiculous. So let's make this Eleanor. I'm just going to change this. Eleanor. So you can always go in and what subtext narrative agents have done is just do the framework of it, just like a first draft. And then you can go in and change stuff, even more so than just the name if you wanted to. Eleanor. Okay. Okay. So then once I've made all the changes, then everything that's down here below, underneath the surface, the subtext, all I have to do is just come back up here and resurface that into a brand new story. So it's going to rewrite it, get rid of Granny and all that stuff, and then put them all together to give a comprehensive understanding of the narrative. So you can pause this and read this if you want. It's basically all the stuff that's there below, but blended in together and taking it from that one single idea. Oh, it's easier to read here, but hopefully you can stop it, read it. But it's taking that one simple story idea, which was here. Now, it defaulted to science fiction action, which is funny. I want that. I want crime, maybe thriller. Okay. A group of 1920 Chicago gangsters. Yeah. So it took that idea and then split it out into these 4 through lines. All right. So then step 2 is to expand on that. And then now let's see what the detailed plot is all about. Because right now, all we know is that there's something strange going on in the house and they're not sure what it's about. So we just come over here, step 2, tap that, generate it, and then it's off to the races to go ahead and figure out what the plot is. So what the plot and players did, 2 things. One, it's going to go through and generate an ensemble of players, about 8 based on archetypal characteristics. So they're going to be very cartoony, like you've seen them a million times before. And then, and you can always change them and mix things around once that's there. And then also go through and do the plot. So it'll show how the story gets kicked off, what the goal is based on that story, and then also how it's resolved at the end of it. So what it's doing right now is it's going through and generating that entire plot, not just the beginning and the end, like I just said, but then also everything else in between. So you'll see here it's got transit 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those are essentially 4 acts. And then in between are the major plot points. So this takes a little bit of time. So I'm going to go ahead and pause. And then once it gets down to the end, we'll go ahead and see what it came up with. All right, that's it. All finished. Let's see what it looks like. So now we've done the first 2 steps. We've done the 4 through lines, and we've gone through and built out the entire basic plot. So just to make it easier, this is the beginning. So the very first major plot point. Then that creates the goal that everybody's trying to seek. And then this is the resolution. So in this, Mr. Quince and his gang's desperate flight from rivals propels them into a surreal adventure, starting with refuge in a mysterious, secluded house. Okay, so because they're running away from somebody, that's how they end up in this place. Now, there's all kinds of thematic stuff that's going on in the background. This particular narrative is defaulting to the Western culture basic narrative, which is there's a problem with running away, and the solution is to chase after it. So like Lion King or something like that. Or no, I'm sorry, it's backwards. It's more, that's right, because I changed it. It's more maybe Terminator, where you're being chased by something, and then you've got to fight off at the end, push away at the end and prevent things from happening in order to successfully get out of there. So here they're just letting themselves be chased and they end up in this house. And then, okay, basic idea of finding out a murderer's identity. So there is a narrative construct, like a thematic meaning to it. And then it's building up on top of all of that based on the story idea, some storytelling that is connected thematically through narrative structure. And there's tens of thousands of different structures. It's not just the same 16 elements or 16 beats. It's not a hero's journey stuff. None of that works. So it's not that. Mr. Quince, at the helm of his gang, stumbles into a mysterious house that seems to hold the key to gaining an upper hand in their ongoing turf war. However, as they delve deeper into the house's labyrinth structure and face its bizarre challenges, Quince realizes that the house might possess the power to not just dominate their rivals, but to challenge the established norms and control structures that have led to rampant criminality. That's actually pretty cool. And then at the end, so to avoid death, The gang confronts the heart of a malevolent house, relying on unity and intellect against its lethal defenses. So then instead of just letting themselves be pursued and chased by other things, now they're going to actually fight back. That's why I said it's like Terminator, avoid. Instead of always just letting things come to you, like actually avoid things and prevent things, and you'll actually win. In the aftermath, as the house's influence begins to wane, Mr. Quince and his gang realize the true power of the house was not in controlling it, but in escaping its grasp. All right, that's actually not too bad. And then down here, you can see it made Mr. Quince the protagonist. Eleanor is what is known as the guardian character. Who's the antagonist? The shadow. Who is the shadow? An unseen force within the house that seems to surveil and influence the gang's actions. Right. So all of these are based on archetypal characters. There's 8 of them in total. I'm just going to leave that. It's totally fine. You can always go in and mess with it later if you want to. But now that we have that not generic, but the general plot of how things get kicked off, the goal, and then how it's resolved, which again is all surfaced up into the basic plot, the beginning, middle, and end. Now what I want to do is do the next step, which will be the emotional character arcs. So this will be not only Mr. Quince and how he grows through the story, but then the challenge that Eleanor brings into it. All I got to do is just tap step 3, say go for it. And now it's going to scaffold out what is happening on the more emotional side of things. So if the plot was more of the logical stuff, this happens and then that happens and that happens, then the subjective, more emotional character arcs are going to be played out in these other 2 through lines. So there's the main character one through line, and then there is the obstacle character through line, and they're going to go at it with each other and argue back and forth, and one of them is going to change to the other one's point of view, and that's the meaning of a story. So what the specific nature of that is, that's what it's generating right now. It's tying it in so that thematically it's going to be tied to what the objective story plot is about. So that's why this idea of having like character-driven stories or plot-driven stories, it's not, none of that even means anything. It's all just whatever. Because every story, great stories are both character-driven and plot-driven, so they're actually tied together such that the problem that's driving the objective story plot is actually reflected in the main character's experience. And definitely in this story, the one that's being built right here. So they're actually tied together. They're not just like happenstance, and it's not, he's always the protagonist and hero's journey and all that stuff. So this is going to be Eleanor's unique position in the story, why she's able to actually challenge Quince to change from somebody who's always going after something to maybe avoiding something towards the end. So again, I'll let this finish up, and then once it's done, we'll go check and see what we got. Okay, all finished. Let's go see what we got here for the character arcs. All right, so now we're on to step 3, and you'll notice it's top to bottom. So we're done with step 3. And this tells the story of just his emotional arc, nothing to do with the house. It shouldn't have anything to do with the house. And you'll see here on the left, again, just like in the objective story, he's somebody who's either probably pursuing something, and then at the end, he's actually trying to escape or run away. Let's see what it came up with. Being pursued by a monster. Mr. Quince's experience being chased by an unexplainable entity within the mysterious house places his unusual confidence and control in jeopardy. Okay. His problematic motivation stems from his sense of being pursued. So he's the kind of person that overreacts maybe when people are pursuing him, forcing him into a corner, then he has to fight back. That's okay. That's not too bad. That's a personal thing. And then at the end, avoiding. In the end, Mr. Quince abandons his natural inclination to confront and overpower threats directly. Instead, he adopts a strategy of avoidance, recognizing that the monstrous forces within the mysterious house cannot be outmaneuvered by brute force or cunning alone. That's actually pretty good. By embracing avoidance, Quince discovers new depths of resourcefulness and resilience within him. That's wonderful. Actually, I'm going to keep that. And then the blending here is just a really nice way of telling that. So you can stop that read if you'd like. And then down here, the obstacle character arc would be Eleanor. And you notice she has both the same thing, because one of them is going to have a 180-degree shift, and the other one is going to have, they're going to stay on the path that they're on, but just grow into it. So in this case, Eleanor is very rational. Is that what's going on here? Using logic. So Eleanor, with her enigmatic presence, confronts Mr. Quince with puzzles and riddles that demand a logical approach. Okay. A stark departure from his usual methods of intimidation and brute force. Actually, this is pretty good. And then she's going to grow into using logic. In the climactic confrontation, Eleanor remains steadfast in her logical approach to resolving the enigma of the house, revealing to Quince that his reliance on force and intimidation is futile against the supernatural. This is tremendous. It's getting really good. Okay. So then, now that we have the two heartfelt emotional arcs, the next thing is then to completely bring everything together into what is known as a story form. And what it's going to do is bring in all the kind of stuff that we've gone over so far and build out what the rest of the narrative should be in order to resonate with a meaningful argument that the story is about. You can think of it like the message of it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and then generate that. And then again, it's going to go out and it's going to do some different things. So first, it's going to go through and identify some key story points, some things that are left to fill in the blanks about what each through line is about. And it's going to do it for all the 4 through lines. So it'll do it for the objective story, then some key moments, key thematic stuff for the main character, some key thematic stuff for the obstacle character, talk about some milestones in their relationship. And then it's going to go over and determine what are the core 2 pivotal elements that wrap the entire thing together. So if you have all this great grand overview of everything, at the very base is an argument between essentially 2 elements, which are carried out in the main character and the obstacle character. And then they have that sort of cliched, you and I are both alike. The reason why that comes up a lot is because it's just a way for somebody to take a shortcut to saying, oh, this is an argument between the I perspective, the argument from within, and then you, like you're looking at somebody else or they're challenging you. You and I are both alike. It's cliched, and sometimes people get it wrong with the wrong 2 characters are saying it. But for the most part, when you hear that conversation going on, it's between the main character and the obstacle character. So what I've done in the subtext is giving you an idea of what that scene would look like. You necessarily wouldn't want to put it in. You could if you wanted to. Again, subtext isn't about writing the story for you. It's about connecting you with the message of what it's all about so that you can write something that means something. So it's not just like pointless. And so this is like a jumping off point. And sometimes it does a pretty good job. But for the most part, it's not written really great. And then at the very end, what it'll do is it'll wrap everything together and take all the stuff that we've gone over and just make a single sentence that is, this is the argument of the narrative. This is what the story is all about. So it should be done here pretty soon. We're looking at 20 minutes, even if, because I'm going to jump ahead in the final video edit. But right now, I'm just looking at 21 minutes. And here we go. Managed to talk my way through it. All right, so then we should have finished step 4. Great. You'll notice it moved over here to the left, and we just have a couple more steps left. But look, so this is the argument, the speakeasy of spirits. All right. If you stop being pursued by a monster, you can discover the identity of a murderer. All right, that's very on the nose. It's very specific. But the idea, the argument of the story is if you stop letting people pursue you or you stop being cornered and allowing that into your life, then you can actually take control of your life. I would actually probably say that. It used finding a murderer's identity, which is fine, but maybe taking control of your life. Let's see. Take control of your life. All right, so what I did is I took the idea, so thematically it's supposed to be about achieving something. That's what the plot is about. And I just wanted something a little more general, less about who's going to argue, hey, if you stop being pursued, you can find a murderer's identity. And then it just came back really quick. It's a splendid example of the story structure element of obtaining. So it always checks and won't let you go too far off the narrative structure. That's what I use the AI stuff for. I don't use it to make an incredible story that, all of a sudden I don't have to actually write. I can have a whole story in 2 seconds. That to me doesn't sound very interesting. what does sound interesting to me is using it to give you a better idea of all the deep narrative thematics that are going on. And then you can build it up from there. So I'm just going to say, okay. So taking control of your life, being pursued by a monster, I would probably say being chased, stalking. So these are all different versions of pursuit. I'm going to just say, I want being pursued or something. Yeah, being pursued. Okay, so then those two are in there and they maintain the thematic structure of everything. And then I could just redo the premise and it'll just take those two elements and redefine what it is up here at the top and then actually explain what it would be about. So by ceasing to be pursued, you can take control of your life. That actually sounds pretty cool. And you see how that sounds like the narrative for Terminator? It's the same idea, right? So the storytelling is different, but the meaning underneath is the same. So here is this long explanation. But again, if I was in the midst of writing a story, I'd want to know, okay, is this what I want my story to be about? And you have a way of working through all the narrative dynamics without spending months and months and then deciding, oh, wait, no, I want to go in this direction. You can always change it later on if you want to, but at least this gets you like a jump start on it all. So these are all the premise settings that I've chosen. And then here's the complete story form. So you'll see we have the 4 through lines. And then again, here is that problem of pursuit. So people coming after you. And then the solution, the thing that solves it all is to fight back. And you'll see here in Mr. Quince, he's got the same thing. That's how these through lines are tied together. They're not just random. There's actually a deep-seated thematic connection between them. And all great stories work this way. And then you'll see over here, Eleanor, she's driven by logic. And then their relationship, I'm not even talking about because that would take a long time. And then down here, you can see it randomly just picked the narrative structure of Looper. So I've taken Looper as, again, a typical narrative structure that is about stop letting yourself be pursued and instead fight back. And then you'll have a triumph here, right? It just picked the random one when you were just using the narrative agents in the beginning, before you can actually make these choices yourself, I just take the one that's most popular. Not that Looper was popular, but that narrative structure is repeated a lot. And here you can see this is that dramatic argument between the main character who's always in pursuit. He's always somebody that feels like you have to chase after something. You have to fight for what you want. And then Eleanor is coming from a place of folding back on things, and maybe you should avoid what's actually there. And it actually looks like might have gotten a little confused. I see Granny popping back up in there. So I will look back at that and see. And if I don't like what's here, I can always come back in here and have it regenerate and try a different take on it. So that's really important. You're not like stuck with what it's there. That's the thing that doesn't make sense to me when you're like, oh, generate an entire story. And then if you don't like anything, how can you not change it? So Granny keeps making her way back in here. Oh, it thinks there's 2 of them. So there's a way that you can hand off things from one character to another. I'm actually going to add this and I'll get rid of the Granny stuff. That way we've got Eleanor, and she's coming from this logical point of view. And then avoiding someone from being harmed, I'm just going to redo this, realign it, avoiding being killed. So overall, Eleanor is about do whatever it takes to avoid being killed, whereas Quince is I'm not going to let anybody tell me what to do. In fact, I don't even see his name here. So I'm going to go ahead and regenerate that just to make sure. It seems a little bit off. So I'll investigate that, but for some reason, weird. Doesn't like that. Interesting. The gangsters, accustomed to navigating the gritty underworld through physical strength, find themselves where their attributes are insufficient. Let me just show you what I would do here. I think this is close, but let's just say Mr. Quince is the kind of gangster who feels like get what you get when you go for it. And if anyone tells you otherwise, then you just work your way through that. It's like the quickest way through. So let's see what that's like. Pursuing what you want. Yeah. Just if you want something, go for it. And whereas Eleanor, on the other hand, is more cautious. And so they go back and forth and have this argument between the two of them. And because this is based on the other one, I'm actually going to go ahead and regenerate the argument here. It's going to take a little while because it's a lot. But what it's going to do is make up that scene of you and I are both alike. And then, no, I'm nothing like you, with those 2 points of view, like one coming from the you get what you get when you go for it, and the other one who's, hey, maybe you should avoid getting into problems in here. So I'm going to add that in there. Let me see if I get rid of this. Okay. We are the same, Mr. Quince said, his voice a rough whisper. We both want control over our destinies, Eleanor. The only difference is how we choose to chase it. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. Control achieved through fear and force is fleeting, Quince. Real power, lasting change, comes from understanding when to move forward and when to step back. Your pursuit has led you to a path of destruction. But what have you really gained? He scoffed. I've gained respect, fear. No one dares cross me. Actually, this isn't too bad. And yet here I am challenging you because I see what your method costs, not just to others, but to you. This is the you and I are both alike. See, this is actually pretty cool. All right. So then what's the next step? All right. So we've done everything and you can see it's brought it all together. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate all the story beats in the story for every through line. All 4 through lines each have things that happen in each act. So I'm going to go ahead and just based on everything that we've talked about before, let's go ahead and build out the narrative so I can have a general idea of what it's all about. So here we go, 30 minutes, but I did talk a little bit about stuff that's going on in here and I did change some things. So let's see what we get. All right, generate story beats. And now it's going to go through and generate the remaining story beats. So it's going to do the main character through line, the obstacle character through line, and the relationship story through line. So you can see here, it's writing Mr. Quince's growth from being somebody that's always pursued and then at the end is avoiding confrontation. Then it will go through and do Eleanor and just how she grows into that logical, rational point of view. And then finally, it's going to develop their relationship, which I haven't talked about at all, but essentially it'll be people who are adversaries at first. Maybe they have some history. She knows him from the streets. Maybe they grew up, they went to school together, whatever, or she knew his mother or something like that. And then they actually become closer by the end of the narrative. At least that's how I run it. They don't necessarily have to grow closer. They could actually grow apart if I wanted to do that. But for right now, we're just going to go with what is actually in here. So I could just show you all the steps that take you from just that one single line to a big, meaningful story. And we're going to be done with the obstacle character through line here. And now it's going to go through the relationship story through line. And as soon as it's finished, I will come back. All right, that's it. It's all finished. I'm going to go ahead and see what we got. All right. For one thing, I know that it should be done here. Oh, it should have this check mark here. Obviously, I need to fix that part. But the story beats are not completely... Actually, they are finished. Okay. Actually, they are finished. It's just I need to fix this down here at the bottom. But you'll see here, objective story. If I looked at the story beats, these are all the things that have happened from act to act. If I look at the main character, then we can see it went ahead and wrote Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and Act 4. And then, oh, interesting. And then the obstacle character, it went ahead and wrote about Eleanor. It's funny, it still thinks Granny's in there, so I'll have to change that. It's because it's the obstacle character, it's a perspective, so it can be handed off from character to character. So I left Granny in there somewhere. I'll have to find out where. And then the relationship story would be how they grow from being adversaries to then becoming close friends. All right. So then now that you have all the story beats that are in there, the next stage over here where my head is plotting. So now that you have this really meaningful understanding of the growth of the narrative from beginning to end, now is the time to put it into scenes. So what I have is over here in the plotting agents, I have the top one, which is one that I've done based on all my experience helping people write stories. Then you have all the nonsense stuff like Save the Cat, Hero's Journey, Story Circle, 8 Sequence, Truby's Blocks. And I just say nonsense because a lot of people rely on this, and they even make generative applications that rely on this. And the problem with these are they are subjective audience based. And by definition, subjective means they don't see the whole picture, and they're more about the experience of the narrative, not what it actually means, even though they try and ascribe some meaning to it. Truby is in between. He's closer to it. So if you wanted to, you could use, say, the cat or hero's journey or whatever to take what it is that you've already written and put it into those familiar 16 beats. Or you can just use the 28 key moments that I've come up with, or even better yet, assuming this button works. Oh, it's not going to work because you're not going to be able to go there. Haha. So this step 6, this should be lit up and there should be a check mark there. And then you would hit 6. I didn't test it because I figured it would work. To plot with these 28 key moments. And when you do that, now it's going to go through the same thing. And this goes really fast because those beats or sequences don't mean anything. You could call them banana and avocado. They don't mean anything because they're just placeholders. It's like a bunch of 3x5 cards and you're just writing it. Okay, my set of 3x5 cards is nicer than your set of 3x5 cards. Subtext is about the meaning of what's actually written on those cards. How you break it up into sequences and scenes, that's totally completely up to you. But in a way to save time and just to lay it out for you right off the bat, I have these agents do it for you. So then if we jump right in there, that one didn't actually take that long. It should jump over to, oh, cool. All right, so it's just that one. So you'll see it did 4, 5, and 6. And then the last thing is just to download the treatment. But just so you can see what that looks like. So here it's gone through and done those 3x5 cards, put the different, has weaved all the different story beats together, not wove, weaved all the different story beats together in a way that is typical of how these things play out. It has 21. There would be 28 if I went into a little bit more detail. And then I'm finished. So this is the whole story from beginning to end. In a general sense, right? It's just a treatment. It's not like you can't turn this in and think it'll work. And then I just go over here to the treatment. And now what this is the entire story, but all the storytelling without any of the narrative dynamics, any of the thematic stuff, none of the deep stuff. It's just all storytelling. The story kicks off with Mr. Quince and his gang being hotly pursued to the streets of Chicago. So this is everything that you need to know in order to write the story. And this is the first act. Then there's a game changer part driven by tales of hidden treasures and powerful artifacts within the house. The gang splits up to search. Their pursuit of wealth and power blinds them to the dangers. So their pursuit is what's actually going to create more problems and lead to Act 2. And then this will be all the things that happen in Act 2. And then finally Act 3. So even though structurally there's 4 acts, I present it in a 3-act structure. And then to download, you just come up here. I personally like Fountain. I write everything in Markdown. I use Fountain because it's cool. And then you just load it into Highland. And then it's great because they've got the sidebar with all the different things. It's all going to be organized to this. And then you just write your narrative. So that's it. If you have any questions about this whole process, I will streamline and make sure that step between 5 and 6 actually shows up correctly. It worked. It just cosmetically didn't look that great. And if you want, maybe I'll go ahead and I'll post this so that you can actually read the whole thing and see that there's something to it. There's something a little more meaningful than just, hey, LLM, write a story based on this and make it hero's journey. And there's a refusal of a call. There's actually something greater being argued, which goes all the way back to the Storyform, which is this idea that if you stop letting yourself be pursued, you just let everything come towards you and hope everything comes to you or whatever, then you can actually take control of your life. So that's 38 minutes. There's a little bit of mess up there in the middle where I was explaining everything. So maybe we'll call 35 minutes. So to go from just this basic story idea, a group of 1920s Chicago gangsters discovers an old house full of strange sights and sounds, to Four Throughlines. We got Eleanor. They've got a relationship going from adversaries to allies. We know the major plot points. We know how they survived the day at the end. We've got all the characters in here. Leo the Lion Bernstein and Sammy Slick Rogers. Then we go into the character arcs and we actually have something really emotional and meaningful about Mr. Quince. going from somebody who always charges in to somebody who pulls back and avoids danger. And also Eleanor's growth in here. And then if we go into the Storyform, then we have the argument that's up here at the top. It gets explained to us, so I know what that is. And if I need to change it or alter it, I always can go back in and do that. I know what their "you and I are both alike" argument is about. I got an idea of what that scene would be like, and I can take that and put it in, or I could actually clean it up and write it. Then I have all the different story beats that are in here. There are a ton of story points that I didn't even go over yet. There's still a whole bunch of stuff that you can do to even go into more depth and more detail. But all the story beats for the objective story, for the main character, obstacle character relationship story. Then I wove all those together into Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, and then ended up down here in the treatment that I could just download into my favorite writing app. So that's it for story idea to full-fledged treatment in the scope of 35 minutes. Thank you so much for checking this out. If you have any kind of questions about anything, please leave a comment down below. Otherwise, I will see you next time.